Port Arthur has celebrated more than 100 years as a Gulf Coast city, but the shores of Sabine Lake have been occupied for more than 1,500 years. American Indians, primarily the Takapas, were the earliest known settlers. The late 1700s brought the first visits from Europeans, English, Spanish, and French. Most were explorers who did not stay, but in the 1800s, Sabine Lake became an avenue for trade. Among the traders was Jean Lafitte, and the legends of hidden treasure have lingered in southeast Texas. The earliest attempt at permanently settling the area was the community of Aurora, located in now what is historic Port Arthur. Some lots were sold around 1840, but the project failed to take off. But then, railroad pioneer Arthur Stilwell, who established the town, wrote that his ideas for his railways and the location of his namesake city came from several other people who spoke to him. Stillwell began settling the city in 1895 with the financial assistance from Dutch investors. The founder of what is now Kansas City Southern Railroad envisioned Port Arthur as a southern terminus for his new railway, a center for trade and tourism. The city dates its official beginnings to its incorporation in 1898. By that time, Stillwell had established the Port Arthur Channel and Dock Company, which began cutting a canal along the western edge of the lake to deep water at Sabine Pass. That is now known as the Intercoastal Canal. The port was open for seagoing shopping with the arrival of the British steamer St. Oswald in August 1899. Pioneers arrived by the hundreds and began building homes and opening businesses. Stillwell's contributions included the Sabine Hotel on Lakeshore Drive, a natatorium to serve all the residents, and an export pier into Sabine Lake. He also brought 300 Dutch colonists to begin a new life as farmers in this rich coastal prairie. Though many of the Dutch names have been lost to Port Arthur, their cultural contributions can still be found in the nearby community of Nederland. In 1899, Stillwell invited his friend John Gates to Port Arthur. Gates quickly decided that he too wanted to have an interest in the development of this new and promising town. Upon being denied a position on the board of the railroad, he promptly, through some other means, had Stillwell's interest declared bankrupt, and Gates made himself president of the Kansas City Southern Railroad. With this auspicious beginning, Gates became the moving force in the development of Port Arthur. Aided by the effects of the Spindletop Gusher in 1901, he built the Mary Gates Hospital in 1909 and founded the Port Arthur Business College, now known today as Lamar State College, Port Arthur, in the same year. Of course, the eruption of the Lucas Gusher at Spindletop in 1901 changed the fate of Port Arthur as well as the entire Golden Triangle area. The port quickly began to serve the needs of the new petrochemical industry, and companies such as Gulf Oil Corporation in 1901 and Texaco in 1902 set up refining facilities in the city. By 1957, Port Arthur was known as the center of the world's prosperous oil refining facilities. And that is still expanding today. What is now called Port Arthur encompasses what were originally a number of different communities established at different times for different reasons. Among those that have been incorporated by the city over the years are Griffin Park, Pear Ridge, and Lakeview. Those names remain in common use today. Two others, Sabine Pass and Port Acres, are still often regarded as self-contained communities. And Sabine Pass, in fact, has its own school district, water district, port authority, and zip code. Port Arthur's nearest neighbors in Jefferson County are Nederland, Port Neches, and Groves, and all of which have rich histories on their own. A significant number of Port Arthurans have left an impact on the country in arts, sports, politics, and business. Among the biggest names that came from Port Arthur is rock artist Janis Joplin, artist Robert Rauschenberg, Texas Governor Alan Shivers, Olympic athlete Babe Saharis, football coach Jimmy Johnson, football player Joe Washington Jr., the actress from Gone with the Wind, Evelyn Keyes, and businessman Mac H. Hanna Jr., among many others. You can read up about their history at the Museum of the Gulf Coast in downtown Port Arthur. By 1909, Port Arthur had become the 12th largest port in the United States in value of exports, and by 1914, it was the second largest oil refining point in the nation. Development as a major petrochemical center was reflected in population growth. From 900 residents in 1900, Port Arthur expanded to a population of 7,663 in 1910. And by 1930, the population rose to 50,902. After the late 1960s, when the city had 69,000 residents, the population slightly declined. In 1990, it was 58,724. By 1950, 5 refineries in the Port Arthur area employed some 12,000 workers, whose salaries accounted for 50% of the money spent in Port Arthur stores. Unionization of this workforce was quite successful. In 1948, the Congress of Industrial Organizations Oil Workers International had some 8,000 Port Arthur members, while the various craft unions of the American Federation of Labor had 5,000. Beginning in the mid-1970s, union influence declined somewhat. In the 1960s, a new bridge called Gulf Gate was built over the Sabine Nature's Waterway in order to connect Port Arthur with Pleasure Island and offer access to the Sabine Lake Causeway leading into Louisiana. That bridge is now named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Bridge. The Nature's River Rainbow Bridge, one of the tallest bridges of the South, 230 feet with a vertical clearance of 176 feet, crosses the Nature's River on State Highway 87 between Port Arthur and neighboring Orange, and was completed in 1931. The Gulf Coast Music Hall of Fame is a permanent exhibit at the Museum of the Gulf Coast. The museum opened in 1994 and is located at 700 Parker Street in downtown Port Arthur. The Hall of Fame features more than 60 artists from the Gulf Coast region, including Janis Joplin, Marcia Ball, Clarence Gatemouth Brown, Edgar and Johnny Winter, Harry Choates, Clifton Chenier, George Jones, Tex Ritter, and ZZ Top. The museum also showcases the many genres that flourish along the Gulf Coast, including Cajun, Zydeco, swamp pop, country, western swing, jazz, blues, soul, and rock and roll. The 39,000 square foot Museum of the Gulf Coast is designed to tell the story of the Texas-Louisiana Gulf Coast region through both conventional and unconventional methods. The museum shows the integration of the Gulf Coast region into the larger national and international community through its many exhibits, including the Music Hall of Fame. The Gulf Coast Music Hall of Fame is one of 7 permanent exhibits at the museum. For induction into the Hall of Fame, a musician must meet specific criteria that include having direct ties to the Gulf Coast region, achieving national success either with a group or as a solo artist, and exemplifying the Gulf Coast's musical heritage. Of the entertainers featured in the Hall of Fame, Janis Joplin is probably the best known. Probably the most prominent female rock and roll artist to come from Texas, Joplin, a Port Arthur native, possessed a powerful voice and commanding stage presence which quickly gained her fame and helped popularize the new psychedelic rock genre. Through artwork, memorabilia, and a wide array of photographs, the museum's Joplin exhibit paints a vivid portrait of the singer's life and career. Other Port Arthur music celebrities are celebrated at the Gulf Coast Music Hall of Fame. J.P. Richardson, known as the Big Bopper, and Tex Ritter, two East Texas natives who made it big in music, represent the broad variety of musical styles found in the Gulf Coast region. Along with its exhibits, the Museum of the Gulf Coast hosts an annual Gulf Coast Music Hall of Fame show every January. Formerly known as the Janis Joplin Birthday Bash, the event pays tribute to the Port Arthur native through a series of concerts and also serves as an induction ceremony for the Music Hall of Fame. The Museum of the Gulf Coast and its Music Hall of Fame are administered by the Port Arthur Historical Society in partnership with Lamar State College Port Arthur and the City of Port Arthur. Leading figures in the museum's operation include its director, archivist, and PAHS president. The museum and the Hall of Fame are open 7 days a week. With the Sabine Pass Ship Channel, the Sabine Nature's Waterway forms a Y-shaped set of interlocking river channels and canals extending from the Gulf of Mexico to Port Arthur, Beaumont, and Orange, Texas. The consultation of 1835 designated the mouth of the Sabine River a port. A custom house was built there 3 years later. Union forces unsuccessfully attempted to use the Sabine and Neches rivers to threaten southeast Texas during the Civil War, but their effort was thwarted at the Battle of Sabine Pass. Extensive construction to improve the waterways began with River and Harbor Acts of 1875, 1882, and 1896, when the mouth of the channel was deepened and jetties were built to prevent silting. Some improvements in the Sabine and Neches rivers were authorized in 1878, and the Port Arthur Canal and Dock Company began building a more suitable channel to Port Arthur in 1895. Legal entanglements necessitated the use of private funds to dredge the Port Arthur Canal west of Sabine Lake. The canal opened in 1899. The discovery of the Spindletop oil field in 1901 increased demand for deep water navigation along the lower Sabine and Neches rivers. With the support of Congressman Samuel Bronson Cooper and future Governor William P. Hobby, Congress appropriated funds for extending the channel. Despite unfavorable reports by engineers, a 25-foot deep channel was completed to Beaumont in 1916. Additional dredging and improvements extended the waterway to Orange. By 1972, the Sabine Neches Waterway was 40 feet deep and 400 feet wide. A series of jetties, canals, rivers, and turning basins now compose the waterway. At the mouth of the channel is the port of Sabine Pass, with jetties extending 3 miles into the Gulf of Mexico. 24 miles north of the waterway via the Sabine River, Sabine Lake, Port Arthur Canal, and Gulf Intracoastal Waterway is Port Arthur. The Sabine Neches Waterway then splits. To the west, the port of Beaumont is 19 miles up the Neches River from Port Arthur. To the east, the port of Orange is 15 miles above the junction via the Sabine River and Intracoastal Canal. The Sabine Neches Waterway and Sabine Pass Ship Channel had been tremendously important to Southeast Texas' development, despite recurring problems with silting. The system supported more than 45 million tons of cargo annually by the 1930s. Over 40,000 vessels used the waterway in 1943. In 1979, well over 75 million tons passed through the Sabine Pass jetties, making the Sabine Neches Shipping District the second largest in the state, behind that of Galveston, Houston, Texas City. Petroleum and petroleum-related products shipped in and out of the waterway's four ports, as well as assorted cargoes associated with the Intercoastal Canal, dominate the busy channels.